Hola amigos, welcome to Beer Clock Biker Talk, where we share a nice ice cold light beer. You can have real beer if you want to. I have to drink this stuff now. Anyway, I've been reading through a book and I recommend it. It's the Meditations, An Emperor's Guide to Mastery by Marcus Aurelius. And this particular one is an edition that was translated by a guy named Sam Torode, Torode. I highly recommend it. The reason I like this is I'm not trying to be an academic. What I'm trying to do is improve my life. And this guy has taken the writings, the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and I guess you could say he's dumbed it down for guys like me. He's made it simple. He's put it in common vernacular, modern language. And I have bought other copies of meditations and read through them. And having read this and then going on to more academically based ones, this is very helpful in laying it. And really, when I go to study Stoicism and to meditate on Stoicism, this is the book, along with one by Epictetus, that I get. Anyway, neither here nor there. I was just thinking today, as I organized my thoughts, about the best thing I ever did for myself. Turned out to be the most scariest thing I ever did for myself, and probably the most courageous thing I ever did for myself. And that is leaving my marriage, leaving the toxic waste pool of my marriage. And I know I keep using toxic a lot, but I also keep thinking, what's a better word than toxic? And there isn't one for this situation. It was toxic. It was unhealthy. But as I was reading through this today, it reminded me of when I first started studying Stoicism. Brief history, which I know I've given, I'm going to give it again. My marriage ended. Now it's been a little over 5 years, but it took 2.5 years to actually get the divorce completed. It was a miserable 2.5 years, or at least the first year and a half was, because I had no control over the situation. I didn't know what I was going to end up being left with, how I was going to survive on what I was left with, all that sort of thing. So it was kind of miserable. And it was about a year in of that very neurotic time in my life that I stumbled across Stoicism, and it struck me for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of it has just worked its way into our culture, and a lot of the things that we think about and take for granted have come from Stoicism. A lot of scripture is Stoic in nature. I have no doubt that St. Paul was a student of Stoicism. As I read this and then I go back and read some of his writings, I realize, yeah, these line up perfectly. And the fact that he was a Roman and studied in Rome as well as in Israel makes me realize he was probably well versed in Stoicism. So anyway, it really spoke to me. And one of the passages from this book that really was very helpful to me, and I'm going to share it with you now. And it comes from book 2, and it's the second passage. And it says, "All I am is a little flesh and breath plus mind." Focus on the mind. I added that. "Put away entertainments, set aside distractions, and look at yourself as you truly are. Blood and bones, a network of nerves and veins. Your breath is only air sucked in one moment and blown out the next. The mind, then, is the ruling part. The mind is the ruling part." No great surprise there. We're aware of this. But the thing about the mind isn't who we are. The mind is just another tool that we can use to improve our lives. We can change our mind. We can program our mind. We can expand our minds. If we can do those things, that means there's something above it. And that's who we truly are. And I'm going to go all woo-woo on you if I'm not careful, and I'm not ready to quite go there quite yet. Here's the final part of that passage, the one that really spoke to me. You're an old man now. It's time to stop being a slave, to no longer be pulled along like a puppet on strings, to stop being dissatisfied with the day and afraid of tomorrow. And that is where I was for that first year or so, until I came across this passage and truly put my heart and mind into the study of Stoic philosophy. I was, in fact, not only dissatisfied with the day because I couldn't really get on with my life. I was technically out of the marriage and free and living another life, but I had that hold over me, and it made me afraid for tomorrow. And so it kind of hit me. All right, what's an old man? I know I tongue-in-cheek and jokingly call myself an old man, but the reality is I am an old man. I'm on the younger side of older age. When you get over 60, I'm sorry guys, you have entered the age of old. Now, elderly, I don't know, maybe that's 75 and above. I don't know. It's all made up crap anyway. But I wish I'd stumbled across this passage earlier, even within my marriage, because it probably would have been freeing for me even earlier than it had been. But I realized I was letting my past, I was letting this other human being that I no longer wanted to be a part of. I didn't want them to be a part of my life, and I didn't want to be a part of their lives. But they had a form of an emotional stranglehold over me. And it was causing me a great deal of pain and suffering and anxiety. And I was allowing it to happen. So I had no control over the court system. I certainly couldn't, get her to sign off on the paperwork. Believe me, it wasn't me dragging this thing out. I'm not Bill Gates, I'm not Jeff Amazon guy. I'm not a guy with billions of dollars that we were fighting over. We had, a house with equity. We had income from another house. You've heard this stuff before. That was our wealth. And I use the term wealth very loosely. But it was my wealth. And I didn't know how much of it I was going to have, and so forth and so on. So I was letting all these concerns really dictate how I felt about myself, how I felt about the world, and my perceptions of the world. And it was at this passage and many others and a whole lot of study that made me sit back and go, I've got to take control over my mind. I need to realize that life is running out for me, old man, and I needed to stop being a slave to other people, a slave to my past, a slave to the anxiety I was feeling over what the future was going to bring. And I had been, for 25 years, I'd been a slave, and I'd been pulled along like a puppet on strings and been totally controlled by one thing or the other that was outside of my ability to control. And if it's outside of me, then it should be meaningless to me. If I can't control it, I don't have any say-so in it. And it was then I began to realize I've got to start letting this stuff go. I've got to let it go. And maybe the situation for you is a little different. Maybe you're still in a marriage and you're trying to figure out, should I stay or should I go? Maybe you're trying to figure out maybe a little more effort. I don't know. A little more effort, a little more time. Another saying among Stoicism is, look to the past and you will know the future. Political movements rise and fall in cycles while human nature remains the same. Now, this too is Marcus Aurelius, and he was talking about the political ups and downs of Rome. But look to your past and look to your future. And that'll tell you what your marriage is going to be like. What's it been like for the last 5 years, for the last 10 years, next 15 years? Well, guess what? That's the way it's going to be for 5 or 10 or 15 years. I had a good buddy of mine. He went through a divorce about a year before I did. And he and I were visiting one day, and he'd been married, 30 years, something like that, and the whole circumstances of why he had chosen to file for divorce and leave were quite a bit different than mine, but totally understandable. And I just asked him one day, I said, so why now? I mean, he's a little younger than me, but he was in his 50s. And I said, why now? And he just said, you know, I don't know what the future's going to be if I get divorced, but I know exactly what the future is going to be if I stay in this marriage. And man, that was a light bulb that went off for me. I didn't know. It was terrifying to leave what I'd known for 25 years. It was terrifying to walk away from what little wealth I'd managed to build up. It was terrifying because I was losing family and friends and a church that I went to for many years, and I was losing all this stuff. I didn't know what the future was going to bring if I walked out of this marriage. But I damn sure knew what my future was going to be if I stayed. And it was going to be more of the same. Nothing was going to change. I'd done all I could. I was out of options. Could she have done something? Maybe. Was she going to? Obviously not. She wasn't. She was content. I wasn't. So it took me realizing I had to be courageous to walk away. It takes courage to walk away from your master when you're a slave. It takes courage, if you're the puppet, to turn around and cut those strings away. It takes courage to finally take control over your own mind and say, I'm tired of being dissatisfied with today and afraid of tomorrow. It takes courage. And so I pass this along to you guys. Is there an option? Can you fix it? Can you make it any better? Or is it going to be more of the same? Can you face your fears? Can you be courageous? I don't know. I know how difficult it is. It's a completely outside our control type of thing. And we have to dig deep inside to find the answers. I don't know what the answers are for my other fellow men out there, but I knew what the answer was for me. And I'm going to tell you right now, I do not feel like a puppet being dragged along by my strings. I do not feel like a slave. I am not dissatisfied with the day, and I am not afraid of tomorrow. I just went through major heart surgery, and you know what? I hated it. I didn't want to do it. It sucked. But you know, I wasn't dissatisfied. I'm like, this is what's happening. I have no control over this. It's either get this done or die. So I got it done. Was I afraid that I would die? Not really. I wasn't going to be afraid of tomorrow. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew what I had to do that day. Gentlemen, life is hard. Don't make it any harder than it needs to be. I hope what I said made a little sense. Cheers, guys. Adios.